Alright, let's dive into something that's been buzzing in political circles lately: Abdul El-Sayed's victory in the Michigan Senate primary. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me ask you this. What does it mean when a progressive candidate like El-Sayed wins in a battleground state like Michigan? Is it a sign of a shifting tide within the Democratic Party, or just a one-off victory? Personally, I think this is way more than just a local race. It's a bellwether for where the party might be headed, and it's got me thinking about the bigger picture. First off, El-Sayed's win wasn't just a win, it was a statement. He beat out Haley Stevens, a moderate backed by the party's establishment, in a race that saw tens of millions of dollars poured into attacking him. What makes this really interesting is how he framed his victory, not as a win for progressivism alone, but as proof that grassroots campaigns can still compete against big money. In my opinion, that's a powerful message, especially in an era where political spending feels out of control. It's not just about ideology, it's about whether everyday voters feel like their voices can still matter against the flood of cash in politics. Now, let's talk about the broader implications. El-Sayed's victory comes at a time when the Democratic Party is at a crossroads. Progressive candidates like him, William Lawrence, and Donovan McKinney are gaining traction, and it's not just happening in Michigan. From my perspective, this feels like a continuation of the energy we saw during Bernie Sanders' campaigns. But here's the thing, El-Sayed isn't a democratic socialist, he's a self-described capitalist who wants to regulate monopolies. What this really suggests is that the progressive label is evolving. It's not just about socialism anymore, it's about addressing economic inequality, healthcare, and the rising cost of living. That's a nuance a lot of people miss. One thing that immediately stands out is how El-Sayed's campaign resonated with voters. He centered his run on Medicare for all, a policy that's often dismissed as too radical. But here's the kicker: in a state like Michigan, where voters are grappling with the cost of healthcare, rent, and groceries, it clearly struck a chord. What many people don't realize is that these radical ideas often align with the everyday struggles of voters. It's not about left versus right, it's about whether politicians are addressing real problems. If you take a step back and think about it, that's a huge shift in how we talk about politics. Now, let's talk about the role of outside spending. Over $40 million was poured into this race to attack El-Sayed, including from groups tied to AIPAC. And yet, he still won. Personally, I think this raises a deeper question: are voters becoming immune to negative ads? Or is it that the issues candidates are running on are simply more compelling than the attacks? A detail I find fascinating is how El-Sayed turned this into a campaign theme, saying, "The commercials are the part of the television show most people don't want to watch." That's not just a clever line, it's a commentary on how voters perceive political advertising today. Another angle that's worth exploring is the role of black voters in this race. Both candidates campaigned heavily in black communities, which make up about 1/5 of the Democratic primary electorate in Michigan. What this really suggests is that candidates can't take these voters for granted. It's not just about showing up at churches or festivals, it's about addressing the issues that matter to them. From my perspective, this is a lesson every politician should take to heart, regardless of party. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room: Donald Trump's reaction. He called El-Sayed a communist loser who hates Jews and Israel, which is not only false but also a dangerous attempt to stoke division. What makes this really interesting is how El-Sayed has consistently denounced anti-Semitism. In my opinion, Trump's comments are less about El-Sayed and more about trying to paint Democrats as extreme. But here's the thing: if El-Sayed wins in November, he could become the first Muslim U.S. senator. That's a historic moment, and it's one that challenges the narrative Trump and others are trying to push. Finally, let's zoom out for a second. Chris Rabb, a Democratic nominee from Philadelphia, said something that stuck with me: this is not just among coastal elites. He's right. Progressive victories aren't just happening in New York or California, they're happening in places like Michigan, New Jersey, and beyond. What this really suggests is that the Democratic Party's base is expanding, and it's not just about ideology. It's about reaching voters who feel unseen, unheard, and disrespected. If the party can tap into that, it could be a game changer. So, where does this leave us? El-Sayed's victory is more than just a primary win, it's a test case for whether progressive policies can win in a battleground state. Personally, I think the bigger question is whether the Democratic Party will learn from this. Will they see it as a sign to embrace bolder policies, or will they double down on the status quo? One thing's for sure, November's general election against Mike Rogers is going to be a battle to watch. As we wrap up, I'll leave you with this: politics is always about more than just the candidates. It's about the voters, the issues, and the stories we tell ourselves about what's possible. El-Sayed's win is a reminder that, even in a system dominated by money and division, there's still room for hope, and for change. What do you think? Is this the start of something bigger, or just a moment in time? Let me know in the comments below.